Hello, and thank you for watching. Today I'm going to be looking at the new Bigtree documentary, and it is amazing. I highly recommend it. I will be linking to it as well in the description. But he's covering multiple studies, but namely one that was done by the Henry Ford Medical Center. And I had previously seen people talk about this study, but I actually didn't know the effort that Bigtree went through to reach out to the scientists, to be the one to basically encourage its entire existence. And then what Bigtree did was meet with them for dinner because he developed a good relationship with the researcher and he wore a hidden camera. And so then he's able to get footage of the scientists basically admitting that there's no flaws in the study, that the study was very well done, that he just didn't release it because he knew that he would lose his job. And he's just very afraid of the backlash that would happen. And he said, furthermore, they're just going to twist my words and the general public won't believe it anyways. And then I'll be made, like another Peter McCullough out of me. And meanwhile, people will still vaccinate their kids and everyone will call me an anti-vaxxer and a liar. So it's very interesting to actually see this study. And so the documentary really highlights that. So I'm going to highlight a few clips of this. However, just a few clips isn't going to do it justice. I highly recommend that you watch it in its entirety. But wow, wow, guys, learn better, do better, right? Let's dive into this.
The biggest change in my career happened when I produced a documentary about vaccinations called Vaxxed. And at the center of that documentary was a whistleblower from the CDC named Dr. William Thompson. He came forward in 2015 and said that they were committing scientific fraud on the vaccine safety studies. Well, that film blew up and became a worldwide sensation, mostly because we got so much bad press, starting with being kicked out of the Tribeca Film Festival.
So if you didn't know, and if you haven't seen Vaxxed, yes, Bigtree made Vaxxed, and it is also a very informative documentary. And then he goes into saying that he was at theaters where Vaxxed was shown, and he would ask the audience, how many of you have an autistic child? And he said time after time after time again that 3/4 of the audience would stand up. And so he started wondering, like, gosh, all of these people are coming to see my movie about vaccines, and 3/4 of them have autistic children. What is going on here? So then they actually started talking to the families afterwards and getting their stories. And the horrific stories of vaccine injuries changed Bigtree and made him continue to make documentaries such as this one that we're going through right now.
Stories. We set up video cameras and started interviewing everybody that wanted to talk. And what I discovered is it wasn't just autism and it wasn't just the MMR vaccine. There was an ocean of vaccine injury and nobody was talking about it.
Doctor says, well, do you want the flu vaccine? I was like, might as well do it now. I gave in. I did polio.
They gave her the Hep B vax. She got the 2-month shots.
The MMR vaccine.
By 10:30 that morning, she was arching her back, clenching her fists. I didn't think I was going to cry.
That night, we were in the hospital with the 106-degree fever.
He began to projectile vomit. He began to this loud pitch scream.
Like, that's when the blood curdling scream started.
I did not lay down for 10 months straight because she would vomit and asphyxiate.
She would vomit at night and she would lie there while she was asleep and she would choke on it.
When we had that vaccination, he lost all language.
He just stopped talking?
He wasn't talking. He didn't want to nurse.
He went to not talking at all.
He was developing really well, except for motor skills.
He's got chronic allergies.
An eczema rash.
Food protein enterolitis syndrome.
She couldn't eat anything on the glycemic index that was too high.
GI symptoms, he started to have gut inflammation.
Chronic snoring. Sleep apnea.
Seizure-like activity.
We woke up. She just...
She died in her arms.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's heartbreaking. Parents losing their children, and then there's another family where their son ended up paralyzed and basically having to have a machine breathe for him after getting a vaccine. So I'll skip past some of that, and now I want to skip forward to where he realized that the government took liability of the vaccine injuries. And so, in order to get information about vaccine injuries or vaccine studies whatsoever at all, you had to sue the government. And this is where Aaron Siri comes in, his attorney, and has been working with him for a long time to try to get information out of the government on what is actually happening. And then they go into the actual studies that are done from the vaccine industry, and well, they're really not studies at all. And this is very important.
Dr. Plotkin, this is the product, the manufacturer insert for Recombavax HB, correct?
Yes.
And the clinical trial experience would be found in section 6.1, correct? Correct? Dr. Plotkin?
Yes.
Okay. In section 6.1, when you look at the clinical trials that were done pre-licensure for Recombavax HB, how long does it say that safety was monitored after each dose?
Let's see. Uh, 5 days.
Okay. Is 5 days long enough to detect an autoimmune issue that arises after 5 days?
No.
Is 5 days long enough to detect any neurological disorder that arose from the vaccine after 5 days?
No.
There is no control group, correct?
It does not mention any control group, no.
No. If you turn to section 6.2, under the nervous system disorders, it states that there have been reports of Guillain-Barré syndrome, correct?
Yes.
As well as multiple sclerosis, exacerbation of multiple sclerosis, myelitis, including transverse myelitis, seizure, febrile seizure, peripheral neuropathy, including Bell's palsy, muscle weakness, hypothesia, and encephalitis, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now,
before you go on, these reports are required to be included because they have been reported to the authorities as happening after vaccination. That is not proof that the vaccine caused those reactions.
In order to establish whether it's causal between the vaccine and the condition, you need a randomized, placebo-controlled study. But
yes.
That was not done for this hepatitis B vaccine before licensure, was it?
No.
Okay.
Without a control group, if you're looking for a phenomenon occurring in the vaccine group, you cannot judge that phenomenon without having a control group.
Isn't it true that it would now be considered unethical to conduct such a study today?
It would be, yes, it would be ethically difficult.
All right, so there was a lot there in a clip, and I'm actually going to let Del Bigtree explain it in the next segment that I'm going to play. I want you to go watch this entire video, though. I'm going to be, like I said, picking out little parts of it. The whole thing together, though, is really just astounding. So basically, to summarize, that was the attorney, and he's asking vaccine, manufacturers about their studies. And they're basically admitting that they didn't do the type of study that would be necessary to show that the vaccine is actually safe. But then they're saying, well, it would be unethical to now do that study. And so it's like, well, we acknowledge that our study is flawed, but that's the study we did, and we're not doing another one.
So this is how the entire game is played. They don't do a safety placebo trial before the vaccine is licensed. Then when people start lining up with all of these serious side effects, you say, well, can you do a placebo-based trial now? And they'll say, no, it's unethical. So they won't do it before. They won't do it after there's injuries. And when they can't do a study, your doctor says to you, I haven't seen any studies that show that these injuries are being caused by the vaccine. Therefore, I'm going to assume they're safe. So let's be clear, vaccine safety is not based on science and data, it's based on an assumption of safety. And that is the stalemate we find ourselves in. But there's one way out of it. Instead of doing a placebo-based study, you can do a retrospective study looking at people that have already made their choice, whether they're going to vaccinate or not. And then you just compare those groups, the ones that got the vaccines and the ones that decided not to vaccinate. We call that the vaccinated versus unvaccinated study. It's been done by a few independent scientists and institutes amongst small groups of children, but never by a major government agency.
So you see where this supposed science, it gets everybody in a catch-22, where it's like, well, in order for us to, come up with causation, we would need to have a study that's done this way. But then they're like, but we're not going to do that study, and we haven't. So then it leads the only way to really get things done and to make comparisons. An Inconvenient Study, which is the name of the documentary, is a study that actually does just that. It looks at thousands of children and it compares the vaccinated to the unvaccinated group, and it follows them over the years down so that you can see down the road which children end up with what kind of illnesses, and then compare.
In Guinea-Bissau, Africa, and recognized 30 years later, you know what, only half the children in the country got that vaccine and the other half didn't. I could do a perfect comparative study between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. And when he did that study, the results blew his mind. So it was clear that though it was protecting against these diseases, it was weakening their immune systems to all sorts of other problems. One of the other scientists on this study did a TED Talk on this.
Children who received DTP vaccine had 5 times higher risk of dying than those who didn't. And this is just one example of many studies now done of DTP vaccine, and they all show the same.
So now he's highlighting some studies that have been done where you can look at populations of children. This is not the big Henry Ford study yet, but these are other important studies that people should be paying attention to. But the media and the government and, doctors and everybody, the who's who of everybody who is in love with vaccines will just call you crazy and an anti-vaxxer if you start talking about this kind of stuff. So, it's really tragic. We're talking about the death of babies. It's like the worst thing ever. Let's just continue.
That was just a study of one vaccine in a group of children. What if you studied children that were receiving not one vaccine, but between 72 and 100 vaccines by the time they're 18? Of course, I'm talking about the most vaccinated nation in the world, the United States of America.
But the Institute of Medicine has looked at the vaccine schedule and said in their 2011 report, there are over 150 injuries that are likely to be associated with vaccines that have never been studied.
Well, what did the CDC do after the Institute of Medicine issued that report?
Instead of doing the study, they ended up doing a study on how to do a vax versus unvax study.
It went and it paid a whole lot of money to issue a white paper.
Yeah, just so much fraud in this industry that people worship. They act like it is a savior, a saving grace, like we would all be dead without it. And want to act like unvaccinated kids and unvaccinated adults are dirty or something. I really truly hope that some minds and some hearts are changed by this documentary. It goes on. There's a lot of information in this, and it's astounding. And like I said, the big study was the Henry Ford study, and I'm going to get into that now. So, like I said, Bigtree, he met with the scientists. He talked him into doing the study. And he had a lot of respect for the scientists, very accredited. He goes into his credentials and some of his history. And the scientists basically took it on as a challenge because Dell's basically prove me wrong. We'll shut up. But just guarantee us, no matter what the results are, that you publish it. If the results are that vaccinated kids are healthier than unvaccinated and it's a legitimate study, you'll shut us up. But if the results show the opposite, you have to still publish it. Well, the results show the opposite. Vaccinated children are very unhealthy. and they're dying at alarming rates compared to unvaccinated kids. And they're not publishing this study. So let's dive more into this.
Aaron called me and said they finished the study. Only one problem. They're not going to publish it. I mean, it was everything we were afraid of. I called Dr. Zervos and I said, can I fly out and meet you for dinner? And he agreed. I wanted to look Zervos in the eyes and ask him, what's so damning in this study that you're afraid to publish it? This was my last chance. I'm going to bring hidden cameras and recording equipment so that no matter what happens at this dinner, I can prove it happened. What do you think about the study you guys have done?
It's important information because of, it did show a difference between the groups. I don't know how to.
Oh, she got it.
How to explain? I don't know how to explain it, but it's important. It was an important finding. The study was for what.
Do you find any flaws in the study? I mean, is there a way they could do the study? You can do the study better with what's there?
Not that I.
No.
That I know. Publishing something like that, I might as well retire. I'd be finished.
I mean, I'm just curious. What in this data makes you think it will be as catastrophic to your career as you think? What was he so afraid of? The study was a bombshell.
18,468 subjects, 1,957 of them were fully unvaccinated. When comparing the health outcomes of the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated, they found an increased risk in the vaccinated of several chronic health conditions.
So they're going to start getting into some of the results of this and the findings, and they're catastrophic. I understand that this man is very concerned with his career. Maybe he might as well retire. He looks older. He probably had a good run. I don't know. Let's look at some of these side effects. Oh, what I wanted to point out was they also discussed in a documentary how they accounted for different variables. So, for example, they mentioned how it is believed that potentially unvaccinated kids just go undiagnosed with things because their parents just don't take them to the doctor as much as vaccinated kids. And I can tell you personally, that is so retarded. Like, I know so many parents that haven't vaccinated, and if their kid's sick, they're taking them to the doctor. They're not medically neglecting their children. They're just very well informed. So, first of all, that's crazy. But they even account for things like that. So they look for fully unvaccinated kids, but then they also look for kids that have been to the doctor with, they're looking at many, many different variables. So this was actually a very well done study, done to the letter, exactly how the CDC and all the entities that regulate these kinds of things say this kind of study should be done. Also, just say, support Del Bigtree and I can, because he has been given a cease and desist letter and still published this documentary. So be praying for him and that he can continue to keep bringing things like this to light, and that Aaron Suri can keep litigating and doing the legal work to bring this kind of stuff to light, because this is the kind of work that saves lives. And we're talking about children here. So it's very important.
6'5".
They also found 3 times the risk for atopic diseases,
which is kind of a subset of allergic diseases.
They found a almost 6 times risk for autoimmune disease.
The autoimmune diseases this paper looked at include thrombocytopenic purpura, rheumatoid arthritis, SLE, systemic lupus erythematosus, MS, multiple sclerosis, and Guillain-Barré syndrome. They mentioned there are over 80 different autoimmune diseases, and what their data showed for autoimmunity, 6 times increase in those who got vaccines when compared to the unvaccinated.
Which is staggering, because autoimmune disorders really represent significant morbidity and health costs and suffering, accrued over a lifetime.
5.5 times risk for neurodevelopmental disorders.
We know that the immune system is intimately connected with both brain development and brain functioning. And so when the immune system gets triggered by illness, potentially by vaccination, you can get neuropsychiatric symptoms, presumably related to brain inflammation and, immune processes in the brain.
2.92 times the amount of motor disabilities, 4.47 times the amount of speech disorders in the vaccinated compared to the unvaccinated.
3 times the rate of developmental delay.
They found the same things I found related to allergy and autoimmunity. Also, 6 times more acute and chronic ear infections.
Interestingly, there were several health conditions where they couldn't even do this analysis because there were none in the unvaccinated group. The way that the mathematical formulas work, you can't have a 0 in any one group and be able to compare risk.
For example, there were 262 children who had ADHD in the vaccinated group. Amongst the unvaccinated group, there were 0 cases of ADHD. 0.
These ones are just mind-boggling. These conditions were not found at all in almost 2,000 unvaccinated kids. 0 brain dysfunction, 0 diabetes, 0 behavioral problems, 0 learning disabilities, 0 intellectual disabilities, 0 tics, and 0 other psychological disabilities in the unvaccinated.
I'm going to read the conclusion here. Despite this, and in contrast to our expectations, this is what we found. We found that exposure to vaccination was independently associated with an overall 2.5-fold increase in the likelihood of developing a chronic health condition when compared to children unexposed to vaccination.
All right, so there's a lot more to it. There's a lot more statistics. There's a lot to this documentary, and I know I've said that a few times, but please watch it, share it. I hope that I have encouraged you to watch it and share it. I'll just say for a long time in my life personally, in closing, I'd like to just kind of make a note. I started learning of parents who didn't vaccinate their children back when I was in college, which was a long time ago now. And I was a biology major, and I took my microbiology classes, and I thought the vaccines were like the greatest thing ever. And, they saved lives, and every old person and every child needed to get one. And I fell for it. I did. I was taught it, and I knew well what I was being taught. I was a very good student. And then I started meeting parents who had unvaccinated kids. And I could tell a difference in their energy, their health, and just the way that they behaved and they acted and the light in their eyes. And I'm not saying that vaccinated kids aren't gorgeous and beautiful and wonderful and that they also don't have a twinkle in their eyes by any means, but I noticed a difference. And I have been around kids nannying, tutoring. Basically, I've been around kids ever since I was a kid. I was babysitting kids. So I asked the parents, okay, what's different about your child? Unfortunately, they trusted me enough to say we never vaccinated. And after about the 3rd family that told me that, where I noticed a big difference in their child and they said, I never vaccinated, I started wondering what the heck was going on. And I started looking into things and I started meeting other friends that had children and they vaccinated their first child, for example. This is a friend I'm thinking of. For example, I won't say her name, but she has many children and she vaccinated her first one and they had seizures. Vaccinated the second one, asthma, allergies, all sorts of problems, eczema. Vaccinated the second one less than the first one. Didn't vaccinate the 3rd and 4th at all, and they had 0 medical conditions and were completely healthy. And she noticed the difference in her children. And then I started meeting other parents who had the same story. They vaccinated their oldest child, but not the other ones. And they had stories to tell. And then I started seeing stories like in What's in Vaxxed, the Vaxxed movie, of parents who had vaccine-injured children. And I realized that instead of people having empathy for them and feeling bad for them, some of them losing their child, some of them, their child just completely debilitated, instead of receiving sympathy, people were calling them names. and making them out to be anti-vaxxers. And they were really just trusting the system more than they were trusting the testimonies of parents. And there's always been something about me where I have found my fellow mothers, fathers, parents, I have found them more credible than the government. Whereas the government, they lie, they gaslight, they steal. I mean, what has the government done that we can trust them on? So, knowing that, I made a quick pivot from what I thought I knew in college, and I started learning again. And I came across people like Sherry Tenpenny, God bless her, and she's built a whole vaccine research library. She brings the receipts. She's not just, they'll drag her through the mud, they'll call her a quack. She's an absolute hero. And so are many others like her that are speaking out. So anyways, I started digging in to the meat and potatoes of it and started realizing how flawed these so-called studies were and learned about the history and things. And I just really want everybody to do that. I want you to sit and talk to each other. Don't just trust the government. I don't care what party's in office. Let's start conversating with each other. Let's start hearing these parents out. They're not the monsters here. They're the victims. Their precious children are the victims. And when we're not human enough to hear them out and have some sympathy for what they've gone through, and we instead want to worship vaccines, and we instead want to worship the system and think that it knows best, and we want to villainize these parents who have been through hell, it's just not right. In my opinion, in my very big opinion that I have on this, it's not right. I know we don't want to start comparing kids and acting like this kid's better than that kid, better than that kid, but we can clearly see that some kids are passing milestones faster. Some kids are not sick with chronic disease. Some kids are really doing bright and they're brilliant in school. And there's other kids that are struggling. And let's try to figure out what's causing this, because we can sit here and we can wait for the government to finally do their job and create a study. But let's say they haven't done it by now, they're not going to. So we can sit and we can wait for them and we can act like they're actually going to come save the day, which we should never do. We should never think the government's here to help. Or we can work together and collectively try to save America's kids ourselves by just refusing to go along with the things that may potentially harm them. And they'll make you believe that if you don't vaccinate your kid, then all these deadly diseases are going to come back. And the thing is the reason that those diseases were deadly back then weren't by lack of vaccine. There were other environmental factors, such as not having proper hygiene and clean water and certain things. When the diseases were pretty much on their way out and eradicated from society anyways without a vaccine, that's when they started acting like, oh, the vaccines saved the day. Roll out the vaccines, they saved the day. And the fact of the matter is the vaccines haven't saved us. And I also know pediatricians who have treated children who have had these childhood illnesses. So the medical system has solutions to childhood illnesses outside of vaccines. We don't need to be giving shots that create a worse problem than what they're supposed to prevent. So anyways, that's my 2 cents. That's my experience. I've talked to lots of parents. I talk to people. I'd rather get to know the minds of my fellow Americans than the mindset of the government. Anyways, I've already made this way longer than I planned on making. And thank you so much if you've watched it this far. And I really hope that you check out some other of my content. I don't have much yet. I'm a newbie, totally new at this. So I hope to get better. So yeah, if you'd like to like and subscribe me, share my stuff, that would be great. No pressure. Just, I'm glad that you watched. All right, thanks. Bye.